welcome everyone to our fifth episode of this podcast now. So we're getting up there, you know. I mean, they're still looking very amateurish, but we'll get better. Yeah, so welcome to our fifth episode. Today we're going to be talking about the major playoffs. So we're at the final stage of our pick'ems now. These will be our predictions all the way to the end. And yeah, well, we've also got some elimination stage stuff to talk about, I imagine. But it's been a fantastic major cycle, I think. It's been obviously really hard to watch the games live, so it's been going back and watching some of these games, but it's been really good. And in terms of like the elite tier teams getting through, it's basically we got everyone but Navi. It feels like. Um, I would almost say like a little bit Furia could have been there for me too. Like I thought they would come out on top over FaZe, but FaZe just show class as always and managed to make it on a dime. But yeah, I think we got basically the best case. Like most of the big dogs are here to play, and
Mhm.
everything kind of feels like we could have 5 or 10 storylines on roll. So I think we can kind of take our pick, but maybe we'll start from what's already happened, and I'll say first topic up, it has to be about Navi.
Mhm.
I'd say they were probably like the heavy favorite coming in here, and they went out. I even had them on my 3-0, but they didn't
So did
make
I.
you did as well, and they went out 2-3, and it was so it was a real tough one because I don't know, like they obviously looked pretty out of it, and like JL, I think in particular, like just wasn't himself. It felt like,
Mhm.
but at the same time, like it felt like even in the game where they lost, and they felt like you were just waiting for them to come back. It almost felt like watching old phase back in the day, and you're just like they're gonna come into the game at some point, and for Navi it just never happened, kind of thing. And obviously it was a bit embarrassing at the end there.
Mhm.
I think with the clip from Emma. Um, but yeah, so what were your thoughts on that? And maybe we can go over a little bit of the pick'ems in general as well. But give me your thoughts on Navi.
Well, first of all, like as a G2 fan, I am quite happy to see them not go in because I feel like
Similarly,
if they did win that heroic match, there is a chance that in these like 4 days that they have, I think it's 4 days, um, that they have between the elimination stage and the playoffs, I feel like Blade and Alexi would have just been cooking and just and we would have seen a new Navi in the playoffs. And from a CS perspective, I'm sad that that's not there, but from a
yeah,
G2 fan's perspective, I am very much happy that they cannot. They've at least. It's now impossible for them to ruin my major again.
yeah. I mean,
Like,
from a Vitality fan standpoint, it's totally the same, mate. So I know what
mhm.
you're saying. Um,
Not that I
yeah,
want the competition to be any less,
no, I
but
mean,
if
objectively,
G2 is going to win,
yeah, objectively
it,
for the maximum competition, you'd want a Navi to be there. You want in a way as well. It's cool for someone else to supplant their storyline by beating them directly. If Heroic wins the major, I guess they get that credit as well. But
mhm,
it seems unlikely. I would say that Heroic have a real shot to win the major. They probably have players that can do it in peak form, but I'd say Dexter hasn't really been totally there. Um, like I'm not really relying on him against some of the heavy hitters that he's going to be up against next. So maybe he plays up to the big time, and I'd love to see it, but remains to be seen, kind of deal.
mhm.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll just quickly outline the pick'ems that I got as well, because I got actually 7 out of the um what is it, 10 overall, 8 overall.
uh,
No, it's 10. It's
it's
10.
10,
It's
10.
10. So I got 7 of 10, which is pretty good, but I got Vitality as a 3-0. Navi I didn't get as one, and then I got FaZe, I got Mouse, I got G2, I got Mongols, I got I think Liquid as well.
You
Um
you didn't have Mongols going 3-0.
no, going through.
Oh, okay.
Um I think it was Liquid. List me out the teams again.
So the actual ones that made it through in the 3-0 category, we have Mongols and Vitality.
Yeah.
So you got the point from Vitality.
Yeah.
And
So
then
yeah, my
in
miss
the
was
3-1,
Mongols.
3-2 games,
Yeah.
um, you got I believe you got the Liquid, right?
Yeah.
You got G2, you got Spirit, you got Mouse,
Spirit. That
and you
was the
got
other one.
Heroic.
So that was my five. I got heroic as well. So that was the five. I missed on Mongols because they went 3-0. And then for my O3s, I think I got wild card and uh who's the other O3?
Well, the actual O3 was big. Did you predict that?
I did not predict big. I
Yeah.
predicted someone else. They went 1-3 as well. It might have been Pain, actually, now that I think
Hmm.
about it. I think they went 1-3, and I think they faced wild card in the O3
Gamer
decider.
Legion?
Game Legion. My bad. I
Yes.
predicted Game Legion. I'm all over the place. Um, I don't really care about the lower ones. That's the problem. I
Hmm.
don't know these teams that well. I vaguely know Game Legion, but I wasn't really thinking about them in this kind of stage.
Hmm.
So give me your predictions on what happened on your side as well.
Well, on my side of things, on the last episode, I briefly touched on it where I basically said that I'm completely fucked because at that point in time, the probability of me getting it correct was minuscule
Yeah,
because only the first day of matches have been played. So immediately both my 3 and O's were wrong. Actually, yeah, because Navi ended up losing to MIBR on that same day because they
yeah,
played two.
yeah.
Um, and G2 lost to Mongols in the opening bracket, and I was actually really scared of that game, and I really did debate taking G2 out of my 3 and 0 purely because of that was their opening match, and I
You actually
believed in
talked to me
Mongols.
before the game, saying you were
Yeah.
afraid of this matchup in particular, and
Hmm.
I kind of laughed it off. But you were right. You were right.
Yeah. And it looked like G2 could have won that game. They just woke up a bit slow, like made a few silly mistakes that they clearly fixed in their next games. Happy to see, but either way, I had them going through 3 and 0. I was wrong, didn't get the point for that. And then Navi, my other 3 and 0, also lost on the first day. So right away, 2 points out of the 10 gone, not possible.
Yeah.
Um, as well as this, Furia won their opening matchup against Spirit, which I really did not see coming, which
No.
is another point away from me. So after the first day, I had 7 spots to make five markings.
Yeah.
Luckily, wildcard was as shit as I expected them to be. Um, going 0 and 3, I got a point for that. And then Vitality, who I had going through 3 and 1, I at the last second I tried to swap them with Navi because they were planning on meeting up in the 3 and 1, and I actually had like second thoughts, being like, oh, Vitality probably will win that game. In a little discussion that we had, but unfortunately it didn't save, so I didn't end up getting the points for that. So I had Vitality going through 3-1, 3-2. That was wrong. Didn't get the point for that. But then Spirit and Mouse, they performed well. They went through. They did well. And then it came down to the actual final day for me, the final 3 sets of games, where I had Mouse versus MIBR. Mouse needed to win that for me, and they did, luckily. Um, because MIBR are not best of 3 teams. They're a best of 1 team.
Yeah.
Like they can beat anyone really in a best of 1, but like their map pool just isn't deep enough to compete with these upper level teams,
No.
and didn't end up making it through as I predicted. The heroic Navi game, because I had Navi going through 3 and 0, and I didn't have heroic going through at all. The results of that game didn't actually affect my pick'ems at all. Neither one would have hurt or done well for me. So
Yeah.
I was actually supporting Heroic in that game, and I was very happy to see that they won, just because I would have felt so bad for them if they went 2-0 up
Yeah.
and then just
Yeah.
lost 3 best of 3s in
Oh,
a row.
and the lineup of the best of threes is like you're
Yeah.
playing Mongols first in amazing form, you get blown out. Like you
Hmm.
play
Even then, they made it
Spirit.
look
Oh,
close.
they hadn't. They were
Yeah.
close on the maps for sure. But it just the Mongols have too much storyline on there. You
Hmm.
know, they got the narrative armor on right now,
Hmm.
and then you play fucking Spirit next. I think it
Yeah.
is.
Going into Spirit, yeah,
Yeah,
that was a 2-1 loss,
two
and they
one
could have
loss.
easily 2-0'd that.
They could have won that, and they're one of the best teams in the world, and you played it close. And then last matchup is Navi, and it's like
Yeah.
the number one team in the world on your
Hmm.
2-2 about to go out the major. It's like fuck, that's a lot of pressure, and
Hmm.
I was impressed that they made it through that gauntlet. It kind of made me think a lot higher of heroic, and to me, I think they did it so much of Nertz's back. To be honest,
Hmm.
Nertz looked like unreal again this tournament. I think he had an amazing start of the year. I think he had a bit of a quiet middle of the year kind of thing into the late end of the year here, but he's on it right now. He looks like straight fire. He
Hmm.
looks like a world class rifler. I'd love to see him
Hmm.
in a roster with even better potential. But this roster has the potential to come into something decent anyway on its own, but he's beyond the level of this roster.
Mhm,
Um, yeah, no, really impressed that by their performance overall.
mhm.
Um,
And I was scared going into that final day
yeah,
because on the previous day, G2 had just manhandled FaZe.
yeah.
So I thought that there was a decent chance that FaZe was going to lose that matchup to
Oh,
Furia,
I
and they
think
very
yeah.
nearly did.
I mean,
They
to
tried
me,
their best to do it.
having like after the games had taken place, I would have said blindly before the tournament FaZe is the favorite against Furia, but I think with the trajectory of the tournament itself and what's happened so far, I'd have actually said like Furia with a better team. I like one of the indicators I think that really shows it really clearly to me is their round win loss is still positive even though they've lost out in the tournament. And if you look at phases, they're deep in the negative, and they're the only team in the playoffs that were. So when it comes down to a final match like this, it's kind of feels like Furia had a real chance to just take it. But maybe at the same time, like FaZe plays for these big moments. They got players that thrive in these moments, and it felt like they just like Rain was just like fuck it. Like if we're going out the major, we're going out my way. And it's just like lights out Counter Strike,
Mhm.
lots of aggression. Rops just came back out of nowhere,
That was
looking like he was totally lost this tournament, and really big game in a big moment that brought them through. So
so happy to
from
see that.
yeah, no, same. It'd be such a disappointment if FaZe just watered out here. It feels like inevitable for me that they're gonna have a roster move, barring like a big finals appearance. Probably like a championship is the only thing they would care about. This season's been so flat for them. But you know, I'm happy to see it's not just gonna be a weak, disappointing like out exit before a playoff. Like at least this team is still gonna show class in the end. No, to me it's already done, but if they can make a semis, that's even better. In terms of the story for them. But yeah, I think I'd say it's been a good lineup overall. I'm happy FaZe that is the one that made it through. If Furia falls short on a thing like that, it means that FaZe probably will do better in a more high pressure situation that comes ahead. So I think it adds for me more excitement to these next games. But so yeah, I think maybe now we just go straight into some of the matchups that are ahead of us, and maybe you talk me through which way you think some of these are playing out, and I'll give you my opinion as
All
well.
right. Well, my first thing is like I think Mongols are making a deep run here.
Yeah,
I think that their draw, they're on the right side of the bracket if they want to have a deep run. I think it's all set up for them. I think the storylines are all there. I think blowing through both the opening and elimination stage 3-0, they have they provided the least amount of data to their opponents that they possibly could in
yeah,
this like situation. They've played the least amount of maps that they could. So they obviously beat G2 in the so they've played 6 maps in this elimination stage. And they played where are they? They played one, two, 4 maps in the previous stage. So they played 10 maps total.
yeah,
Whereas a team like FaZe, who had to make it all the way through, they
yeah.
have in the elimination stage alone, they played one, two, three, four, five, six, 7 games
You mean
in
you
the
mean
elimination
maps, right?
or maps,
Yeah,
maps, yes. And yeah, so they played way more. They've got way more data out there for teams like that. So they provided the least amount. They're also probably one of the least studied anyway because they are in the Asian scene. And generally speaking, these European teams aren't necessarily pracking against them. They're not scrimming against them. Um, and I think that when it comes to this Mao's matchup, like primarily, I think that they are definitely taking that home.
yeah.
Mao's doesn't look the strongest that they've been. They've definitely looked better during earlier parts of the year, and I think this is Mongol's chance to make a deep run at the major. I still have G2 winning it, but I think that on my pick'ems, I have them beating Mao's and I have them beating Spirit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think to start it off the bat, I'm kind of with you. I'm also predicting Mongols to take over Mao's. I think it's not necessarily exactly for the same reasons, but first I'd like to highlight on the Mongols roster, Blitz is doing an excellent job with the
Oh,
leading. Like it's looking really clean. It's looking like they always have an idea of what they're doing and they're playing as a unit. very effectively. I'd also say Senzu is the player that's really jumping out at me. He seems like a revelation. I mean, he was already a known good player, but seems like a step up in terms of what he's delivering and the level and the pressure with which he's delivering it under. I'd say is much different. I'd also like to highlight 910. I think he's been more than serviceable in his role as an AWPer. I think maybe in the matches ahead it becomes more of an issue for them. But I think at least in this opening round matchup, he's to me he's comparable to Torji, and like I don't think it's particularly there's not too much gap in it for me. I think maybe he's ahead in form in this moment, but I'd say reasonably comparable overall. I think more for me, one of the major factors I'm taking from this and predicting for Mongols is I think Mao's a serial bottlers under pressure. This is the highest level of pressure. It's the major playoffs. This is a team with a big storyline coming through. They feel amazing right now. They win every game they're in right now, barring the RMR. But in these opening and elimination stages of the major, they've been exceptional. And I think their storyline has won't take them to the final. That's my prediction. But I'm predicting them in this first match for sure. I think Mao's the thing is right, and it's dangerous. It feels dangerous to count Mao's out. They've obviously got a lot of upside, a lot of highlights. I think this end of the year for them could be really important as well. This major probably carries a lot of weight in what could happen. That it's a big moment for them. I'd be as excited to see them show me that they're a fucking force to be reckoned with as if Mongols took them out here. I think I'm just predicting that what I've seen over this year is that Mao's can't be relied upon in these moments. I'm going with my gut on that, and I'm saying that that is still the case. Um, I think it's more to do with the lack of experience on the roster than anything else. Actually, having watched them enough now, I think it's more just they have a group of young guys together, and they're nervous in these big situations, and for them it's still very new. But I think Brolan isn't really some real big veteran. Like he was the young guy on the team when he was on the Fnatic. He was briefly on NAP as well. I think he was middle of the pack in terms of experience there, maybe. But I don't know. I think this Miles team just don't look like killers on LAN. Right now, Mongols look the most killer on LAN they've ever looked, and they're playing up to this moment for them a lot more. Um, first Asian major, first Asian team this deep in a major. It's the best performance. I haven't watched a lot of 1.6, but I understand the Korean, I think it's MVP team, would have done something equivalent or above this in the past, but and since it's easily been 10 years since we've seen an Asian team this good, and from my personal perspective, it's the best team I've ever seen come out of Asia. They really do play a coherent style of CS. So
Mhm,
yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. I think the Mongols are going to pull through on the first round. So let's take it down one.
mhm. You want to move on to the Spirit Liquid game?
Yeah, yeah,
All right. I think Spirit's going to take this. I'm just saying that straight up.
yeah,
I don't think Liquid has the depth in their roster really. Like, I don't think Yakindar is legit. I don't think he's had a few okay performances, in my opinion, in the last few days during this major, but he has far to go before he's proven his worth on this team.
yeah, definitely.
And and he's like earned an extra couple months on his spot because I think he needs to go. Um, Ultimate as well seems to be very, very good. He's definitely like outperformed what people expected of him when he was first joining on the Liquid team.
Yeah,
However, I don't think that he has the same like capabilities as someone like Shiro, for example. I think Shiro is a much more defined and not maybe known quantity, but also just like he's a tier above Ultimate. Ultimate hasn't quite proven himself on the same way that Shiro has. And Twist, obviously, I love Twist. Like he's one of my top favorite players of all time. Like just entertaining. He's just so skilled, so technical. Like he knows the game very well.
yeah,
However, I'm still not sold on his IGLing, and the other aspects of Liquid are just seeming a bit flat, really, as well. Like they didn't really have the toughest run through the elimination stage either. They Yeah, they lost to Navi, who didn't even make it. They looked like in poor form. So they lost their BO1 to Navi. Then they ended up, so they got a win against Gamer Legion, and then they beat Furia. These are both best of ones. So, and they were also actually close, the Gamer Legion game being 13-10 in Liquid's favor, and then the Furia game being 13-9 in Liquid's favor. So both of these best of ones that they've actually managed to win have been close and not even
Weak,
against that
weak
high level of
opposition. Yeah.
competition. And then to actually qualify, they have to play against MIBR in a best of three, which is known to be one of the easiest
Well,
matchups you
I
can
mean,
get in
let's
this
say it this
tournament.
way: MIBR didn't make it through themselves from this
Yes. So
position. So
every single team that Liquid beat did not make it through themselves.
yeah,
Um, and one of them ended up basically facing up against Wildcard to go for the O3. So the Gamer Legion team that Liquid ended up beating was in contention and almost lost to Wildcard.
yeah,
So
they were
like
my 203 picks, so I
yeah,
couldn't get them both right.
and then looking at the opening stage as well, Liquid's wins are against Cloud9, Wildcard. Then they go on to beat FlyQuest to go 3-0. So they did go 3-0, but like they got the easiest 3-0 they could possibly choose. Like
Yeah.
once again, none of the teams that they ended up beating
I think
made
more
it
than
through,
anything,
besides Wildcard.
they were by far the expected favorite in every match they
Hmm.
played so far. I think this is the first time in the tournament that we see that isn't the case.
Yeah, this is the first time they're playing like proper tier one opposition,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
I don't think they've proven themselves enough to make a case for themselves in this moment in the tournament.
I'll make the case. I'll make the case. I think I'm
With
with
Donk
you.
looking as hot as he is.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm saying Spirit's the one that's going to come out of that match on top. But let me give you a bit more to the Liquid story because I think right now they're one of they are among the highest rated teams. It makes sense when you look at the path through the tournament that they took. They've beaten down all the things that were in front of them, but none of them were that hard or they had high expectations of them themselves. I'd say Furia maybe was the more interesting one of all of the ones that they took. Probably the one with the most meaning out of all of them. But the one ray of light I'll give a highlight to right now is I think Naf is performing unbelievably well. Like he's farmed. He's a big reason Liquid found such easy time going through this time, and I think normally he doesn't get much of the limelight. He's always a good candidate. No one ever expects him to be cut or anything like that. But he's not the guy highlighted. It's Twist. It's
Mhm,
Ultimate. Ekindel's bad performance is usually highlighted, and then we talk about Naf. But right now, I'm gonna talk about Naf first because he was nasty as fuck. Like he lives up to his name right now. You
mhm,
know what I mean? He was crazy. Um, Killers in these games where other people were finding upsets and getting pressured on. Like this guy's a ice cold as he always is, but looking hot
mhm,
as fuck as well doing it. And he plays a very chilled back kind of clutching role. He's playing a lot of aggressive lurks and things like that. So yeah, it's cool to see that he's still able to pop off, and it's been a little while since I've seen a pop off this big from him. I'd also say the team overall is rated decently. In the tournament itself, like it's rated I think fourth or fifth in the whole tournament. And yeah, I think you're getting the firepower maybe where you expect, and you're lacking the firepower where you expect. Twist is still good. Ultimate's had a pretty decent time of it, but again, farming lower opposition, you're not really playing AWPers as good or better than you, so it's hard to say whether that holds true. I think it's a bit easier to do something like that on an AWP. So I'm with you. Like they're not the favorite. I think my case for Liquid again relies on the OG Liquid stars in NAF and Twists. Missing their old buddy Elige, but still a storied duo, and I think it's gonna really hang on them again if they want to find a way through this. Um, as you said as well, I'd say Twists is calling. It looks a little bit better than it was. I still think they lack a lot of depth. I think when they get I think the end of their map pool looks a little bit weak. They have their maps that they can play, but I don't think they have that much range, and I think against the top teams, like it's going to be more of an issue. Like it's much less of a favored match for you in that setup where they have the map pool advantage against you instead. So yeah, I think Spirit on the other hand, if we talk about Spirit, Donk is the highest rated player right now. Zero's a little behind, Monacy's fourth, and I think Nico's third. So it's looking like a pretty normal CS2 lineup at the top. But I'd say Donk's looking unbelievable. I'd say he's a big reason Spirit have come through this like without too much stress. Like he just looks like a monster. That 1v5 he had against Heroic, and some people were calling
Oh,
it a 1v4, but you know, at the same time, like it was crazy. Like the shots he's hitting and the transfer in between from the top of the stairs down just looks clean as hell, and it just looks like he's wired on something right now. And yeah, his time to kill looks crazy. I'd say Shiro's doing fine. Like he's definitely good enough. I think he's going to be better than Ultimate in this game. That's my prediction. I think that's going to be a real difference maker for a team like Liquid. They're going to need him to be better if they want to win. But yeah, I think Shiro's been very good. Zontic's had a few of his big moments have come through. Like I would say he's been okay. Like he's a young player still to me. It's a really awkward situation for him being the Ukrainian on a Russian team. And you know, I still think he's all right. I still may not pick him in the long run for this team. I'd still rather see a Perfecto play his role probably. But at the same time, I wasn't too disappointed with him. It was passable. Magix, I was not enjoying.
oh,
I felt
no.
like he was a bit of a liability. And I don't know. I've yet to really like. He played some shit roles, and I give him a bit of credit in the stats, not looking so good for that. But I don't think he actually plays them well enough for the level that Spirit's at and what it's aiming at. I think what should be aiming at with the player like Don Shiro locked in, like I just think he's a filler player that isn't really living up to the fill. So I would say he's had like a big moment, I think, this tournament, but it's
He
not
had
enough.
1v3.
Yeah, like
That was about it.
it's nothing crazy. You could get it out of a lot of other players, I think, and in a scene so flush with talent, it's looking a bit one dimensional having him in the lineup because he's not already a weapon that they can rely on. Chopper's calling looks better. I'm seeing a bit different setups in the beginning of rounds. I feel like that I wasn't seeing so much before. I think they're looking a bit different this tournament. There's definitely not the same calls that we've been seeing out of Spirit recently. Whether or not it's good enough again is a real question. Like Donk and Shira are players that warp the understanding of what's good enough a lot in and for good reason. I'd say it's looking a lot better. Um, but he'd still be under the chopping block for me. Overall, I think their mid season just looked so flat. Like until this point in the major, this season's also looked just super flat. The first season, I'd say they did really well. Obviously, crowning achievement with the Kato win, but I don't know. I'm not totally sold on it. I think there's some new stuff there. Clearly, hopefully, it's enough for them to make a deep run here. They're not going to have the hardest route. Um, but yeah, yeah. What are your thoughts on Spirit as well?
Well, I have some more stuff to say about Spirit, but I'll get to that when we talk about the potential Spirit versus Mongols matchup.
Sure,
Um, but I'll just touch on a few of the key points that you talked about there. Like Donk, unbelievable this tournament. Definitely number one player right now in terms of this tournament alone. I still think Wanasi's the number one of the year.
sure,
That'll up for change depending on how this tournament goes. But like
definitely.
Donk is making a good case for himself right now.
He definitely is. Yeah,
Shiro, serviceable, like above average, definitely one of the best AWPers at this stage of the tournament, still around. Um, but I do want to harp on a little bit of the Magic's hate. And I think when we look back at the tournaments that you referenced there, like their obvious, like famous Katowice win, where
sure.
Donk tied Nico's all-time rating of 1.7 for the tournament, which is
Craziness. Over way more games as well. It's just
yeah.
so crazy.
But when we look back at the spirit of that time, the main thing that people were saying was obviously everyone was talking about Donk. Everyone was being like, "Holy shit, who is this kid?
Yeah,
Where's he come from?" But along with that, people were praising the support in the team that was allowing Donk to do the things that he was doing.
yeah,
And I would say since then, we've had a relatively steady decline in the support of Spirit and the actual team structure. Bec- One, because obviously everyone was looking at them from that point on, going, "What are they doing? How do we stop this?" And they were
I
being
think Donk's
anti-stratted.
probably the most studied player of the year.
Yeah, of
Maybe him
course,
or Munacy. Like it's got to be one of them two.
definitely. But I feel like Donk. being Donk, he's adapted, he's staying on top of his game. He hasn't really fallen off. However, people have managed to find holes in the Spirit team rather than Donk as a player himself.
Yeah,
And one of those holes is Magic's, and he has looked pedestrian this last tournament.
yeah.
And he is
He's looked
someone that could
pedestrian for a
very
while, mate. I think.
yeah, and he was good at the beginning of Spirit, but as soon as they started to get studied, he was immediately identified as a liability for their team. And lots of teams, G2 being a highlight of that, have just punished Spirit for this. And I think going into the new year, Spirit's going to make changes. Magic's is definitely going to be the first one to go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, Magix was a player once I thought had some talent. I think back on I think it was a previous Spirit lineup even. He was like a third star on that team. And he was good in that role. I think early in Spirit, I'm with you. I was quite impressed. To me, he made quite a good transition in role. He was playing very bitch role style. It kind of reminded me of something like Boomich might have been doing in like the Prime Navi. We think about I thought they were similar. Like they got a lot of value out of their lives and without many resources at all, and it was quite impressive. But I'm with you. The later it's gone, the less impressive it's been, and it's more like he's barely delivering and seemingly getting found out. I could say it's his fault in a way, partly. Like he's not adapted enough. He's not aware enough of how people are viewing him and are trying to punish him and how to counter the way that they're going to try and punish you or to be expecting it, maybe. But I think it's also on the shoulders of like Chopper, the coach, because if you're getting red and things like that in your setup and you can't provide enough support on your players, then I think you're also messing up. Like there have always been times when you look at Prime Navi is a good example. Simple goes to the other side because he understands his teammates are getting exploited in these rounds. They have to do very dynamic setups where they're switching out players a lot. Like you have to do things like that to cover for bad players if they're getting exploited. You're not doing as much of that as you need, maybe to cover for a guy like Magix. It's partly his problem, it's partly your problem. Both parties can take the blame. Overall, like I would say, you're really correct in your understanding of what happened to Spirit in their tactical approach and how they've been understood. I think they got figured out. Like they hit the world stage. They appeared in such heat that everyone checked them out, and from there it was you've seen that they've had a really hard time adapting as a team. Like individually, Donk is very capable. Shearer is quite experienced and very capable as well. And the rest of the team aren't as talented, can't adapt as easily to what's been going on for them. And this is the result. But Donk is having a fantastic tournament. He alone could bring them to heaven in that sense. Shiro as a little reliable sidekick. I think overall, my issues are going to lie with, I think, so the support crew could be picked apart in this major. Like you need some more out of them, I think, to really have the best chance of lifting the trophy if Donk isn't going to go ultra nova. Um, but I think overall, some of the teams coming up later on, it's going to be a tough time for the support crew of this team. In this opening match, easily a favorite against Liquid. They have way too many upsides. It's not unwinnable for Liquid, but certainly very favored for Spirit. Maybe maybe even like 65-35 kind of deal.
I'd
Maybe
even give
even
it more than that.
70-30. It's
Yeah.
considerably favored. I'd say Liquid have a lot of talent as well, though. It's not impossible they could win a game like this. They got veteran smarts and experience on Spirit as well. It's not impossible. But let's get up to the next matchup. We've talked this one over quite a bit, and I'm sure we'll talk it over a little bit more. So here we go. Tell me about it.
Here we go. G2 heroic. All right, G2 heroic. Um, Obviously, I think G2 is going to win this. I'm G2 fan. I think they look in really hot form. Even if they weren't the favorites for this, I would be predicting this because I am just a
Die hard,
diehard
die
G2 fan.
hard. We
I want Nika to win the
know who
major.
we think is making the final. Let's put it that
Yeah,
way. Not to give a spoiler away on this video, but just saying there might be a
yeah.
prediction in there somewhere.
Um, so basically, like, if Nico gets this major, I think I might cry. So, like, I would be in tears just watching him lift that trophy
before
for the
he's out
final
on
time.
Saudi
I would.
islands floating in
It would just make
cash.
me feel so much better of watching him just disappear into the Saudi
I get that.
like
You
Falcons
you want him to leave
cesspool.
on the high. You don't want it to be always
Yeah.
a question.
I don't want his if he does go to Falcons, I don't want that to be his first major, if that makes sense. Like it doesn't I don't want people to buy Nico's first major. I would be fine if Mondesi carried him.
Sure, sure. No,
I don't
that's
want
not the same,
like
right?
oil money. I don't want oil money of just surrounding like essentially purchasing Nico his thing. Um, but I
Still have to win
think
it in the end.
when we look at the head to head, if we look at like first of all the AWPers, Mondesi versus Dexter.
Yeah. Especially in like I could say Dexter's peak is like he could fight in there, but right now he hasn't hit that peak. I haven't seen it really. Like
Yeah.
I'm not seeing that many flashes of it. He just looks like a above average AWPer maybe. Like he's doing okay. I'm not that impressed though. Like there's a lot more left to show if he wants to be compared to Monacy, you know?
Mm. So I think that Kixan is probably a better IGL than Snacks
Fair. I think probably
because,
true.
but he has less pieces to work with. So
Definitely.
it's this, and with the state that CS2 is in right now, where basically all the maps are T-sided, um, a
Even
lot
Nuke's
of
T sided, mate. It's crazy,
yeah,
yeah.
it's ridiculous. And so I think this state of CS, the team play is actually less important than the actual star potential. So that will play into this matchup heavily, I would say, where you could just have like Nico, Malbs, Hunter. Snacks is looking like he has a good tournament. He's had some fucking
Yeah, he's
good
actually
plays.
looked like he's had a bit of confidence. He's won some big
Yeah.
rounds, I'd say. Yeah.
And then obviously Monacy. Like he had a weak RMR, but I think he was under the weather. Also,
Time zones
like
and everything as well.
time zones, everything, like he was getting used to it.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, like if he was to have a bad game or a bad section of the tournament, he chose the right one to do it in.
I
They
also
still
think
got
Monacy
by,
always
like,
does this. Like you think he's like having an off day, but he just heats up. Like I think
yeah,
he's a big stage player. He's the number
exactly.
one big stage player I think we got in CS right now.
Oh,
And
certainly.
like I'm more than expecting like he's always the guy who comes up in the big game, you know? Like he doesn't let a big game go past him without performing his numbers. Like that's just it feels like the only time I've ever seen that is ESWC. I'd say he had a tough one there, and in that biggest moment he couldn't shine. But beyond that, I've never seen Munacy not. So
Mhm. He
you know
plays to the moment,
he plays to
and
the moment.
he gets better as the stakes go higher. And I'm just looking forward to seeing him do it at the major.
Yeah,
Um, and then looking at the rest of the supporting cast, like Dexter for Monacy, Monacy will take that. Kixon for Snacks. Kixon's probably I would give the favor to Kixon,
yeah,
but I don't think that this is the defining quality of this game, if that makes sense.
I get you.
Like, I don't
It
think the
won't be
disparity,
enough to make the
yeah,
difference. Yeah,
the disparity in their calling does not match up for the disparity in the rest of the players'
I mean
teams. Nurts
Munacy
is
and
obviously
Dexter's
insane.
disparity is bigger than the cooling disparity. Let's be real.
Oh, so yeah,
Yeah.
certainly. And then also, I don't think the calling's that important at this place that we are in CS2 right now.
I
Um,
just think there's a real chance it's not as effective against players that are so good. You know, like your calls have to be something crazy to be able to overcome players like this without players like this. You know, I think you're always on the back foot there when you got two as well, like three if you want to include Malbs. I think he's a monster too. So I think it's really hard to just overcome it on pure intellect and cool. Like
and
you're gonna need
yeah,
some
and
power as well.
Hunter's been having a good tournament as well.
There we
So
are.
let's match up Nerts with Nico. Nico's been looking like he's having a good tournament. So has Nerts, obviously.
I think it's a comparable at least
That's a comparable
conversation.
one. That's probably the closest point that we
Yeah,
have besides the Snacks Kixon comparison.
indeed. Yeah.
Um, but then we get on to like people like Tesses and Shush, where we're comparing them to Malbs and Hunter.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing.
And
Like, I think,
Hunter's been
yeah,
having a very good tournament so far.
Testis is a
Malbs
good
is
tournament as well. I'd say. Like,
Malbs has been stepping up and up and up,
yeah,
and I just don't. me as a G2 fan, I would be very, very upset if Heroic ended up getting this across the line.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
that would, for me, that would mean that there was a falling apart of the team communication and G2 doing a classic G2 flop rather than G2 playing their good game and then getting beaten. I think if G2 shows up to play on this day, there's no way Heroic's taking across the finish line.
So I'll highlight just a couple extra things. So with Tesses, I think he's had a quite good tournament. I think he's been one of the underrated players. I'd say that that storyline should mean more than it does to me, but it doesn't mean that much. And my reasons for that are outlined as so, which is I think Tesses is one of the biggest drop off players in big stage matches and like high pressure matches. I think back to Heroic, I think he's often the player who doesn't show up in the game when they go out, kind of thing. And like he's had a really good tournament so far. Like I could believe he was going to continue some good form, but if the game starts to go sideways for them, like I'm thinking he's not going to be in those last few rounds showing up. That's my guess. I think it's been a problem for him before. It's on him to show me he can overcome that. I feel like a little bit at this point. Shush, I'm less concerned about in that sense, but he's also not in as good form. Like I think he's always been an underrated piece in teams like this, but I think the firepower disparity is almost too much. Malbs alone, Malbs alone may be comparable to Nuts. You know what I mean? I would probably put Nuts out ahead, but it's like your third player in G2 might be comparable to the best player in Heroic. It's a real
And,
disparity here. I think
yeah.
we're looking for like I don't know, we're looking for almost career highlights out of Heroic players to be able to make this happen against G2, unless G2 have a real collapsing, which is always possible. You got to give G2 that chance. You know, they could fuck it up
Mhm.
if anyone could.
They most certainly can.
But I think Monacy is just on crazy shit. Like I just have to buy into Monacy. I think Nico, it's a major. He never fucking doesn't care about a major. He's gonna try. So I think that's a um fair expectation, and I think G2 are the ones also for me coming through this match. So I'll bring up the next topic because
I have one thing to add.
oh, absolutely.
I'm doing a little drawing here. I've got a whiteboard because I tutor online.
Let's get a
So I
diagram
tutor
out.
maths online.
Yeah,
Um,
let's bring out the
so
charts
I
here.
have the whiteboard, I have the pen. I might as well use it. So if I'm going to place Nico here and Nertz here, I would place Malbs about here. Okay. So
Sure.
I'm obviously taking two G2 players into
I
account,
love this.
and I'm obviously taking two G2 players into account. I'm only taking one of Heroic's players.
Indeed.
However, I would say that Nico, on this scale, Nico's a certain distance above Nerds. I would give Nico the edge in the head-to-head,
Yeah.
considering both their like recent
I also
forms,
just think the breadth
history.
of their play is very different. Like
Yeah.
Nuts has I think of Nuts as like a sword with one edge, but Nico's got two. You know, he can play it slow, he can play it fast, but Nuts is like he's gonna get up in your face and aggressive and open, and make moves that way. And I think he's more of a one-dimensional weapon. If even though his peak is probably the same in that one
Mhm.
dimension.
Yes, and Malbs is similar in that way, where
Yeah,
he's also like one-dimensional, but I would give the edge to Nerds in that one dimension.
yeah, definitely. I'm with you.
So essentially, I've got two G2 players on here, one heroic player, but essentially, the distance that Nico is above Nertz is about the distance that Nertz is above Malbs.
Sure. I think it's
So you
slightly
could,
up. I think Nuts is closer to Nico than he is to Malbs, but like I think
yes,
you've also
yeah,
demonstrated that as well.
as
Yeah,
you can see on the graph.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
um, but essentially, we almost have two Nertzes on G2,
yeah,
if you want to view it this way.
yeah. No, that I think is pretty much the case. Yeah,
Yeah, there's essentially two Nertzes. So is two Nertz better than one Nertz? I think so.
maths would say that is the case.
Yeah,
Maths would show that's the case. I think I'm with you. I think G2 should win this. The only way G2 don't win it is something in their heads go wrong. You know, like it's not going to be because they don't have the ability on the server. They certainly do. They're certainly above. And I think it's G2's game to lose. You know,
yes. It would
I
be G2 losing rather than Heroic winning, in my opinion.
certainly, certainly. Well, in that with the charting complete, we've charted our course or some bullshit.
Yeah,
I think it's
we
time.
have.
I think we're here. We're Vitality phase. I think it's the most exciting opening round matchup. Mongols and Maos might be comparably exciting, but I'd say like not in terms of the current form of the teams, right? Vitality are clearly the better team. I think in the head to head, they're also much ahead in this year since Chengdu for FaZe. I'm not even sure they played head to head there, but as in since that period, I don't think FaZe have beaten Vitality once. Um, so in that sense, the matchup is very unfair. But like, let me highlight this: the previous major, the one that put out Vitality was FaZe themselves. Very close games. He wasn't quite there, but they did it. And I would say this is a story lineup and game. Um, to happen again in the major. I'm happy to see it. I love seeing this matchup. I think if FaZe can come round, they can have the overall like roll on roll star power to be ahead. Because at their best, four of those players can play a world class level. And I think at the best of Vitality, I'm going to say three do, and Mezzi is short a little, but playing a strong support role. So I think in terms of that, the potential in this game is quite high. I think FaZe are also veterans. Like people like Vitality aren't going to get in FaZe's head for free. Like they're not going to be scared to play against players that they've played against many, many times already at this point in their careers. So in that sense, I think it's also exciting because I don't think FaZe will be necessarily mentally massively disadvantaged. Carrigan can also call very well. I'd say Carrigan is on if we're doing head to heads again. I'd say Carrigan's ahead of Apex. Apex is quite high up in my opinion, though. I've been this year particularly. I think I've been quite impressed with his calling compared to other years, maybe. Um, they've just been so consistent. Ziwu is going to be number one in the server. That should be the case. Rops could scale to him potentially, but I'd say it's unlikely. Rops can certainly have big games, but I think on average, Ziwu's definitely should be ahead in the rating. I'd say if you're gonna go to like, I mean, if you're actually comparing role to role, Brokey's not even close. He again has a big game quality, but isn't on average better than Zero at all. If I'm really doing role to role comparisons, I think Spinks is also better than either like Rops, I would say, or Frozen. I mean, Frozen would be in the conversation to be as good as Spinks, probably. Maybe he actually would be considered better, but Spinks is definitely above Rops right now. Flames, I'd also say he's above like a Rain if that's the opener pick that you want for FaZe. I'd say he's above. Um, and then what Mezzi up against I guess it's against Rops. If Spinks is against Frozen, I'd say Rops is a lot better. So it's an interesting matchup. I'd say there's disparity among the roles enough that it could balance out. And in the middle, we would find a fantastic game of Counter Strike. I think Vitality are too good though. They've been very consistent. Like I've never seen them fall short of a playoff pretty much the whole year. I think they've had one Katowice, but apart from that, they're in every playoff. They consistently make semis. I think personally, it's Vitality's major to win. They definitely have the team to do it. They haven't got the other opposition to, ahead of them in the tournament. Navi would probably the biggest contender for a good team like Vitality. G2 certainly have a good matchup against them themselves, which we will talk about soon. I take Vitality, but I'm expecting this to be an exciting game. And to me, it can be a great thing for Vitality. If they come out ahead, if it's a close game and they come out ahead, I think it can only be good for your mentality coming out as a Vitality player and taking one over a team that's so famous for close games and wins. So yeah, well, give me some thoughts on this matchup, Ted.
I think Vitality's starmanship should bring them across the line. I think FaZe, very proud of them making it through. However, I do think that this is the end for them. Like they showed classic FaZe in the comeback against Furia, and they've done it. But I don't think that level of performance and looking that weak against someone like Furia and having to do the four phase comeback against Furia
Yeah,
rather than dismantling them in the first place. Like this wasn't you weren't beating a Prime Navi or anyone like that. Like this was Furia. Sure, Quesorado was looking hot. Um, Fallen was calling a pretty good game, but like at the end of the day, if you're looking to win this tournament, that's not those matches shouldn't be close. And Vitality made a point of that by going through 3-0. and
True.
not even making it look like there's a chance of them
But this is the thing.
dropping that.
Vitality is a famous group stage farmer. FaZe
They
is a
are.
famous group stage choker, and I've seen FaZe go down 0-2 in a group stage and win the whole tournament. So in terms of like the storylines of those, like there are reasons you could maybe negate or like somewhat downplay where FaZe is at and upplay where Vitality's at. But I think ultimately one of the things that really indicates to me that FaZe isn't a true top team right now is even in this phase, they are the one team that's made it through to the playoffs with a negative round win loss rate. It's not everything, I'm aware of that, but their ratings aren't even that strong overall. And I think FaZe definitely still look like a stunted, you know, one dimensional weapon, probably is the truth of it. But um I'm looking for an exciting game. I think if it's Vitality's major to win, I want them to really overcome it. I want them to show me that they can win the hard majors as well, because obviously for good reason Paris was not like it's not as impressive on the resume as it is on paper. And I'd like to see Zero really show the class of a world class player for an all time player that is required. And I think he's got a real nice set of games that if he was the best right now and he really, deserves it, he can take it and it will mean everything. So I think with that being said, let's conclude. I think FaZe are likely to lose that game. I'll never count them truly out. What would you put the betting odds on this game, Ted?
I think that they, depending on what phase show up, if Furia game has like revitalized them and made them believe again, then I believe that FaZe could potentially win a map, but there's no way that they're winning two. And also, um, I feel like the map pool probably does favor Vitality quite a bit. Just in terms of they both generally play both this more or less the same maps, so there aren't really going to be any punish picks for FaZe going into this, which is what I think they would need if they were to take it over the line,
Sure,
because they would need a map that they are definitely going to win, and then they could win the third.
sure.
Whereas the conversation going on in my mind right now is, can FaZe even win one map?
Yeah, that is
So,
which is fair. Like Vitality's map pool is probably the strongest or second strongest in the scene.
mm,
Like across the board, they're very good on basically all the maps. So yeah, I'm with you. I think heavy favorite. I'll give FaZe a chance in any game on any map though. Like I've seen a lot out of those players. I'd say the worst case is they have like 30% odds. I think the best case is maybe 40%. In reality, I'm bigging up a lot the FaZe angle. I think those players maybe go beyond statistics sometimes in moments like these and can do things you don't expect because they're veterans, they're proven, they have ego and attitude to win games, and they know how to win. So there's always a chance, but it's definitely not FaZe's favored game, and it's one of the worst draws they could have got on the opening round. But they put themselves in that spot, so only themselves to blame on that one, and no pity from us.
mm,
So right, well, with that being said, I think we can say we got past Vitality and FaZe, and we both agree that it's Vitality. And so far, we are all agreed up on every matchup,
mm.
which will not continue much longer, I'm sure.
Oh no,
So,
it will not.
firstly, let's go to Mongols versus Spirit as our predicted next matchup. Who do you have taking the cake?
Okay, this is 90% just for storylines, and
I love
also I
it.
just think, um, and also I dislike Magic's, so I want him gone. So therefore, I don't want Spirit to win this
I
tournament.
see the logic. I rate it.
But storyline wise, I think that Mongols deserve it. They're like it. It would just be so beautiful to see them in that grand finals, have the crowd cheering for them. Maybe not cheering for them if it's against G2. G2's a big team over
They're
there.
probably the most famous team out there, mate.
Yeah, but I do think that the Mongols definitely could bring this across the finish line against a team like Spirit and the shambles that they've seemingly been in recently. Like I would say that Mongols, they don't have the star power. Like they do have great star power, but
Senzu,
just
yeah,
yeah, just not comparable to Donk. You know, like not everyone has a Donk. No one can have a Donk besides Spirit.
yeah.
Like so I think Spirit's got it on like the actual star power, but this is kind of where I go back on myself from what I said earlier about how team play is less important in this modern day of CS. I think Mongols' team play is the best type of team play you could have for this type of CS, where it's not super thought out. It's not comparable to like Prime Astralis, where like
Sure,
the round was already won before it even started. Like they don't have like an ace up their sleeve in terms of strats in that way,
sure.
but they are just a very consolidated, concise unit that knows when to act and doesn't second guess themselves.
I think
They're
they
very
have
confident.
very nice planned reactions.
Yes.
Like they've taught this
And
stuff out and they figured it out. Yeah.
yeah, and they work as a cohesive unit. They play off each other. If they see gaps in the defense, they have the intuition to actually take advantage of that and break out of the system when they need
Yeah,
to
they're
and make
allowed
big
actually quite
plays.
a surprising amount of initiative in the setup that they have, which I find, yeah, it's one of the exciting things
So,
about them.
so I think in terms of this head-to-head matchup, I think on the team play side of things, I think Chopper does call a good game, but I think Blitz
I'm with you.
has been calling a very good game for this tournament, and also Blitz has been fragging way harder than any of the IGLs in this tournament.
I mean, I think the only one is Twists. Is the only
Yeah, but
fragging like, but I'm like he's not an
I don't even
IGL in the same
he's not
way.
even a full
Yeah, no,
IGL.
exactly. But I'm with you. Like, I think the biggest diff that you're gonna have, barring Donk and anyone else, is pretty much Blitz and Chopper. I think Blitz is a far superior IGL with what he's shown so far,
And
and
then
up
when we look
until
at the
this
rest of the team, obviously they don't have a donk, but they do have
Senzu.
Senzu and also Techno 4K. Techno 4K has been looking really
He's
good in
had a
his
good
big
tournament.
moments.
He's had a big tournament.
Senzu's been looking hot. 910 once again doesn't beat out Shiro in a one-to-one direct battle, but the gaps that his teammates have over people like Zontix, Magix, and Chopper make up for this in this regard. And I think 910 is more than serviceable. He can definitely take initiative, take the fights that he needs to, find a gap. He's a very good combat AWPer. He's good in most situations, I would say. Like his decision making seems really good. He seems like he can do a bit of combat AWPing, like almost Monacy style, where he's like up close in your face, disrespectful.
Yeah,
But he
I'd
can
say it's
also
like OG Fallen the most
yeah.
actually that I
Yeah.
watch him.
But he can also just like hold the line and cut the map in half if he needs to, if he's in a good position. Where he doesn't overplay his hand, but he also doesn't underplay his hand. And he's not the most incredibly skilled player in the world, but he knows how skilled he is and therefore plays towards that. And I would I wouldn't be surprised if Spirit won this necessarily, because Donk could just show up and sneeze on them and make them win the game for them. And that could just be Mongols' storyline over right then and there. However, I do think that they have a good chance to bring this across the line, and we could be seeing a Mongols in the grand finals.
Very cool. Well, thanks for saying all of that so that I can say this and say I'm the sobering car through the puddle, splashing you head to toe as you walk around down the side of the road and you're like fuck's sake and the guy's laughing and fucking giving you the finger out the
Yeah,
window. So, you know, I'm going to come in and say Spirit are going to win that. I'm going to be the voice of reason. I don't love that I have to do this because I really rate Mongols. Likewise, I'll give you the chance. Like I see the world. I think Blitz is a better IGL. He's a better player than Chopper. I think Senzu actually overall is probably not comparable to Donk, but he's not like a million miles off right now in current
yeah,
form. He's not a million miles away. Like he's a top 10 player in this tournament right now, and he's definitely providing a lot of star power. Likewise, 910, he's perfectly serviceable in this game. He will be farming Magix and Chopper quite a lot, but I expect Shiro will get the better of him overall. Um, and I am living on Donk. Like no one has an answer to this guy in real like terms. He's finding his numbers one way or another, and I think it may be just a bit too much for Mongols to overcome. On the flip side, I see the world like I think Mongols as a unit has much better potential to perform across the board, and if they win, it'll be by doing that. Um, where Spirit are unable to, they'll, I mean, it's like that fucking other game from the other day. It was like 20 on Donk, 20 on Shiro, and then like 6 on all other 3 players each. And it's like, they don't even have combined what one of the players has or something.
yeah.
And it's like
Ridiculous.
ridiculousness, but it's Donk and Shiro are that good. and I think Mongols just maybe has a little bit too little firepower, or they're just not quite ready for this matchup. Is my prediction. But likewise, they still have a chance. In even in this lineup, and I think if anything in that game, I think the pressure's really on Spirit that the one's expected to win. It's all on Donk and Shira's back, and if Mongols can find a way of reading or neutralizing that weapon somewhat, isolating it or playing to the other side where the other teammates are and things like that, they can get the better of the reads in that way. You could see a win. But yeah, I think this is the race for the number one in the world tournament that we're having right now. It feels like that. I think Monacy's the one ahead right now, but it could go any way. And I think Donk's going to show that he's still got a case in this tournament.
To reference a previous game where during the Spirit Heroic game, obviously everyone's seen it by now, Donk 1v5.
Yeah,
I don't think that that happens against Mongols.
yeah. I think Mongols are smarter. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
with you.
they wouldn't be over peaking in that. They wouldn't be giving him 1v1 fights. They would have played together as a team and they would have just traded that kill. I would say Donk gets two, maybe three in that instance.
Sure.
Um, and I also don't think Heroic would make the same mistake of having the lowest player on the team be the last one to peak. When we looked at that stairs transfer for the final two kills,
Yeah, it's
um,
ugly.
the first one to make contact was the top of the stairs guy. He was at 100 HP. Donk was ready for it and just immediately took his head off. But people might not notice when they look at the VOD because it might not, like if you look at the highlights, quite a lot of the time they cut the assist out of it. The guy that he transferred to was 27 HP. He only had to land one bullet in the chest.
Yeah,
Like it's not that hard of a spray transfer. The fact
sure.
that the fact that the guy didn't kill him in the time that it took him to kill the stairs guy and swap over to him, that's a travesty.
Yeah,
However, the guy was Donk only had to land one bullet, whereas someone much less skilled than him, I forgot exactly who it was on the heroic team, they just weren't able to do it in that time. And I think Mongols would have actually like played together as a team much more and wouldn't have allowed that to even be a possibility.
yeah. Well, I'm kind of with you. Mongols is a better team. I
And
just
heroic made that series look close.
I
So
struggle.
I think
I still just struggle to see Donk is like the ultimate king of the one dimensional weapon that is like unstoppable in its ways. Like I just think like there is no counter to this player. Like he's gonna find his numbers one way or another. It seems like that's the rule is that, and everything that goes against it is the exception that proves the rule. It feels like with this kid. I think he's such a good one dimensional weapon. Like as much as I agree with you about Mongols being the better team, like I think you need a like not only a better team but a better team with better staff. Like more comparable in the overall skill level to be able to crush a weapon like Donk. Like I think Navi's a great example of a team that I would expect to crush Donk, but even then he crushed Navi. Like you know, um, but yeah. Anyway, I think Donk's a big enough weapon. Is my final analysis. Very deep, I know, but I think Mongols will be happy with a semi-finals appearance in the major. Like, come on, that's fucking epic already. So we'll go on to the next one. I'm sure this will be the most disputed uh pick here. Anyone that's
um
watching any episode of this should know why. But if you haven't, then you're gonna figure it out pretty quick. So I'm taking Vitality to win this match. Oh, the chart's ready. The chart is
it's
ready.
ready.
Holy shit,
All
I'm
right.
fucked, boys. I'm fucked.
um yeah, so I actually drew this up when you were doing your vitality phase
Damn,
talk,
the preparation.
and I actually I didn't act the numbers that I've assigned numbers as well to this, and
Oh
you'll see
right,
it when I turn it
the
around. But
wrecked ranking.
I just want to say that I chose these numbers and decided on them before I added them up. Okay? So, I'll put my phone here to block out some of the detail.
Okay,
So, what we have here, we have a scale. It goes from 0 to 10. It's not exactly perfect to scale representation. The gap's not. I
sure.
didn't bring a ruler out, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
The numbers are what
but
matters, right?
So what I have here is I have Monacy up at 9.5. I have Zyru at 9.4, very, very close,
Sure.
which is why Zyru could take the number one if like they do win this matchup and go on to win the major.
Yeah.
Like If we paused everything now, Monacy wins the number one in this year for me. But not everything's been paused.
No,
Like,
and also what's interesting is, like, despite everything, Zaiwu has kept his foot in the door for this conversation the whole year.
mm,
His teams have always appeared in playoffs. He's always been an exceptional player in these games, barring the major where he was ill. Like, I think he's done an incredible job to keep in this
oh,
conversation,
certainly.
regardless of the results, a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I have Monacy 9.5, Zaiwu 9.4. I got Nico at 9. Then
sure.
I've got Spinks at 8.5,
I give him a
Malbs at
little bit more.
8.4.
I'll
Yeah,
give Nah, Spinks is not that, like, Malbs is good, but he's a little bit below that. You like
okay.
Either Spinks is above or Malbs is a little lower.
I'm
In
also
my
thinking
view.
of peak form. Like, I'm thinking of like everyone's on their good day in this.
I get that,
Um,
but I think like maybe Malbs' best day is that close to Spinks' best day, but like their average day is like quite,
mhm.
there's a distance there a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. Malbs is he's a younger player. He's
I
not as
would
experienced.
like
There's lots of things going
just to
on in
give you
there.
my like an understanding of where I'm at. I would say like the distance Nico is to Spinks, I'd say Spinks and Malbs are probably that distance for me.
Okay, yeah, we can get into that.
Sure.
But these are the numbers that I
Yeah,
decided when
yeah,
I was
yeah,
going
yeah.
through
No,
it.
I get it. I get it.
Um, and I have Flames at 8.2, slightly below Malbs. That
Sure.
might be another contentious one.
No, I
And then I've
think
got
he's pretty close.
Hunter at 7.8, so another slight jump there. And then I've got Mezzi at 7.5.
Okay, those two are a
Um,
little bit off for me, but yeah, we'll get into that.
yeah. I did this quickly while you're doing
Yeah,
your
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, 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 yeah. This is not
And then I've
the
got
gospel.
Apex down at 6, and I've got Snacks down at 5.
Somewhat
Okay.
fair. I'd almost say that like I'm a little insulted that Apex is within a point of Snacks a little bit, but at the same time, I don't think it's totally unreasonable.
This is all like
If you're doing
this is
fragging,
everyone's
then
peak
yeah,
form.
yeah,
So I added these numbers up. I chose them kind of randomly. Obviously, I have a bit of reason to it. Like there
sure,
is an order to this.
yeah,
Um, some of the gaps, contention, things could be moved around if we had a bit more of a discussion. However, this is my first instinct when I was writing these numbers down.
yeah.
And when I added it up,
It's fucking 1.1. It's the difference between Munacy and Ziwu between it. That's crazy.
it just happened to work out
That's
that
so
G2
funny.
has a very, very slight edge. So,
The numbers. Wait. So just to give, don't before you rub it out, if you haven't
mm,
already,
no,
um,
I haven't upped
if
that.
you could hold it up for me, I'd love to. So okay, so firstly, I think Spinks and Nico, like first of all, Monacy and Zero, I'd say that's fine. Like the point one, I think if anything, actually, maybe there's a point two difference, and Monacy slightly more ahead. Actually, in my view, like especially in these big games, I think Monacy's
Mhm.
proven way more. So I'm willing to give it to Monacy, and he's such a big game player. So Nico to Ziwu, I'd say that's about right. I think like maybe I'd put personally Nico at like an 8.9, but that's really semantic picky stuff. I'd say he's about a 0.05 away from a
Yeah,
Ziwu in my mind, right? Spinks is also about the right way away from Nico. So the top four look fine to me. Okay, but the
I'm a
next
big Malps fan.
this
I
is
love
where
Malps.
it goes a bit wrong for me. Okay, I'd put Malbs like at 8 flat. I put Flames at like a 7.8, 7.9. Like to me,
Okay.
Flames is a little bit worse than Malbs.
So you've got Malps at an 8. So
Yeah, I'd say 8 or 7.9, and then I'd say
okay,
in comparison, like Flames would be either a 7.9 or a 7.8. I think probably like they're very close. I'd give Malbs a little bit more over Flames. Maybe it's even not
okay,
2 away.
okay.
Um,
So I'll give him a 7.8 then.
okay,
And then we got Hunter. I had him at 7.8. What do you have for him?
way too high, way too high. I think Hunter's best to me, like his best, maybe is it could be that, but he is like a 7 player for me. He's such
7.
a
Okay.
yeah because like I see him as a part that's replaceable in G2 because
Oh, certainly.
he's
I've called his name multiple
definitely,
times.
I'd say he's above average. Like he's a little bit above average, but he's not really good enough to like always be consistently stable in this conversation, and people are always going to think like this is a name that's replaceable right now. And I think that
Oh,
means he's a
certainly.
7 to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so then
Okay.
we have what Mezzi.
Mezzi.
So
I
I
had Mezzi at 7.5.
so yeah, I'd say he's like a 6.7 for me. Like
6.7.
role adaptation wise, if I was factoring in his role, I'd say he's also a 7 because I think he gets a lot less resource than Hunter. And with that considered, I'd say he's high above. But if I'm going pure performance, which I think this should be, I would say he's a 6.7 relative to Hunter, and that feels about right. So then we go
Okay.
into like Apex and Snacks, and I think I'm gonna be a little bit different from you here. Because I
Okay.
think Apex, like, if we're talking stats in game, like, I'll say he's a 6. That's fine. If we're talking IGLing, like, he's like a 6.5 to a 7 to me, like, at least, but
Okay. 6.7.
I won't go for like IGLing and stuff, but if like Snacks isn't even a 5, bro. I don't even think he's a 5. Like, I think he's like a 4.8, 4.7 player because, like,
He's had some really good games recently.
sure, if
He
you
had a
want to
two.
go
He had a
off,
2 KD the other
if you
day.
want a current form and like best case scenario, I give you a 5.5. The what like I think where he's actually at, his true representation of who I can expect him to be. Like, if I go on the higher end, I'll say he's like 4.8. Okay, like that's the best I'll do for him
Okay.
because to me, he's like his calling is so substandard and his fragging isn't very good either. His fragging is quite bad, and in terms of the impact of the frags, I also don't think it's that good either. So I'd say like he's a level below. Like Apex also will be like similar in fragging, but the impact of his frags is significantly more. Like he's using himself in places to get an edge in the round way more than I see Snacks do. Like he's just not playing the winning CS as much as I think a guy like Apex is. So I'll say that's my final setup, and you tell me what the maths works out to be. I think it should be very close again. Like maybe Vitality now gets slightly ahead. It wouldn't be that surprising with if you were using my brain that it would end up that way. But you know, um, I think that's more like that's where I sort of believe these players are at.
Uh,
The calculator is computing right now.
yeah. So your new version of Vitality has gone down 0.5. So
Yeah,
now I had him at a 39.6. You have him at a 39.1,
sure.
and G2 has gone down 1.4.
Whoa, that's
So
a
now
lot.
now Vitality's ahead.
Okay,
So it's 38.3 to 39.1. So it's still pretty close though.
okay. It's what 0.4 away basically.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we're both giving them very even odds in this, and I think it does. I think it works out that way. I
And
think
the
yeah.
main thing in that made the difference was that Snacks went down, whereas Apex actually went up quite a bit.
Sure. Yeah, I understand that. Like, I think if you're talking pure fragging, I might be a little bit delusional on that one. But I do think like they are like to compare them so closely as IGLs seems ridiculous to me. Like there's clear like levels of difference between them.
That was overall.
Yes, I know you're talking about
Like,
fragging as well. I know you're talking just about fragging. So it's like on that level, like they are very much more comparable. So anyway, I'd say we've like with that all established, for us it's a very close game, right? Like I think I'd say in the head to head, like if I'm going out of server things, I'd say G2 has an edge on Vitality. I think the last two times they played, I think they beaten Vitality directly. I think Vitality beat them once as well, but like I think overall, like Munassi seems to have a really good game against Vitality quite often. I think Zuru sometimes goes a bit quiet against G2 himself in some of these matches. It's kind of like 50-50 on that one. Like it's happened a few times, but sometimes it's doesn't seem to be a factor at all. But overall, like that means that Munassi's the less affected one on average, and I think that could really give them an edge here. I'm gonna just put my heart with Zero and the boys because that is what I did in my predictions as well, obviously. But
yeah,
I
this is such a close game that we just choose our favorite team in this
literally,
series.
and I think in terms of like talking it over in the matchup, is a lot of interesting stuff there as well. Like as much as I think Vitality players maybe have like more of a choking problem than G2 players will do, and maybe you could expect slightly less performance on that end. Well, yeah, I mean, look, I mean the stars mostly, but true as
Nico.
well. I mean, yeah, it honestly won't, but Nico could. Like what I would say though is on the team front, Vitality's clearly a lot better. Like I think they're much more coherent as a unit. They're playing like a very much more professional class of CS to me. Whether or not it always wins is kind of like beside the point. I think in the counter argument, like I think the aggressive way that like G2 players gives Muncie a lot of freedom to do what he wants, gives Nico a lot of freedom to do what he wants, and those players can win you the game on their own, even against tier
Yeah.
one well shot called lineups. So I think it's close. I'm going to say the better team overall is going to win. I think Vitality is a team of consummate professionals. I think this is their major to win. They're the favorite here now, in my view, and I'm picking them ahead. And I think this is the big deciding. I mean, I want for me right. part of it is also what the storyline would mean, which is Zero directly beats Monacy on a head to head, and then directly beats Donk on a head to head to really cement that he's actually number one.
Yeah, because
So
you have Spirit going through as well. Yeah,
I have
that's a
Spirit
big
going through
storyline
as
because I
well
will.
because that's what I want. Like that's what I want in exchange for what happened to Paris because I want him to actually have to beat his rivals on stage and show me he can do it, and I think he can, and I think this team is good enough. So, and I think they're also in great form for the time that we're in. It's going to be a crazy match. I'm hyped no matter what happens, and yeah, if
I want
so,
this to go all three maps, overtimes. I want everything. I want everyone playing their best in this
I think
matchup.
this could be one of the legendary games of CS of all time if we get what we were looking for. You
Mhm.
know, like it's one of the most meaningful time that these two players have played against or teams have played against each other, barring like Dallas maybe. Um, I don't know. Like, I think it's going to be a crazy series. There's a lot of big stars showing up here, and it's about who's the best player right now. That's
I
enough to decide it.
Yeah, and I was listening to a Snake and Banter episode today,
Mm.
and I forgot which point it was, but Maui Snake had a point where essentially what is wrong with CS right now is the reason that G2 will win the major. It's
Sounds
because
like a Maui
like
take.
yeah, because like he just wants to take the snacks demos and just show them to Valve and be like, this is winning. Like just show them like the Blast World Premiere or World Finals and just be like, this team won doing this. Is
Yeah.
this how you want your game to be?
Well, for real though.
And like I understand it. It's not the depth of it's not like Prime Astralis where you think back and just be like, oh my God, like that was peak of CS. Whereas like with G2, it is just very much individual based and whether or not the team shows up on that day. And there's no like genius calls or anything like that. Like Snacks will just do from the spawn calls and just like full A executes 5 rounds in a row. Like it's not super deep strats. It's just they have the lineups, they throw the smokes, they throw the flashes. Monacy, Nico, Malbs run into the site. They get some kills. The other team saves or attempts a retake that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like their T side is so simplistic, but it doesn't need to be any more than that. And I would kind of like appreciate it if there were some updates to the game to do with like the M4s and like the Molotovs, just to make the game a bit more CT sided. Thorin was going on a rant about this on the same episode
Yeah.
where he's talking about like CT-sided maps make CS better because you have to have these genius IGLs that break through on like old nuke, old train, where like Astralis, they made train their bitch because they could actually win it from the T side,
I'd say
and
it's even
things
more
like that don't
across the
exist
board than
anymore.
that. Like, let me just put some stuff out there, personal views. I think it's beyond CT side is weaker and T side is stronger. Like, I actually think it's more like aggressive play is much higher has much higher rewards relative to the risk, and defensive play is the opposite. It's, the rewards much diminished for playing a low risk style, and like I think players on a whole could show you this as well. Like look at the players that proliferated the most. It's like the very aggressive players. It's like Monacy. It's like Donk. It's Shiro is one of the few defensive style players that still keeps it working. And Ziwu's the middle player for me. He's like parts aggressive, parts defensive, and I'd say he lies on the center line a little bit for me. But you look across the board, like most of the riflers that succeed right now are like the offensive style riflers with big aggressive moves, and most of the riflers that are far away from what they used to be feel like they're more of the defensive style player with the smart play and playing the odds and things like that. Doesn't seem to work as well. So I think it's a problem with the way it works as a whole. Like I'm not sure exact and AWPs as well, like to bring that into the conversation, defensive AWPing or like angle holding or line holding in general feels much less good in CS2 relative to CS:GO. I think you see a lot less players succeed at doing that. It's much more difficult to do now, and because of that, you see like people have a bit more unconventional styles of AWPing to succeed. I think overall, um, so I think it's more in the core of the game, then it's like as much as Molotov change will improve CT odds and things like that, and economy changes will also improve CT odds. I think one of the really big difficult problems is pushing and aggressive fighting is much stronger than it was before, and defensive play and smart outthinking is much weaker than it was before. So as a whole, like the philosophy of the game is just wildly different now. Like, it pays a lot more to be an opening player than to be the defensive smart player clutching out in rounds, because it's a lot harder to do to walk. Walking into an angle feels terrible, but running into an angle feels like you're almost invincible sometimes. So I think as a whole, the game is wildly different in that regard. But what would like to see changed for that? I think even just the movement speed could be slightly down, and that would already be quite a big improvement, because I think it's also about the way you slide out. You just slide out a lot further into the swing than maybe people can react to. And overall, I think people's time to kill is slightly down over CS:GO to CS2. I think it's also because of the people aren't well adjusted to the width that they should be holding for certain peaks and things like that. Um, so a slower movement speed could also do something like that for me, because CT and defensive play naturally becomes stronger off the back of that. Molotovs obviously would work as well, as would economic changes, but um, I'm thinking more of the foundation of the game itself. What we have left to talk about is, for me, my finals pick is going to be Spirit versus Vitality, and I'll quickly talk through that. And you will talk through your final pick, and we can conclude with Vitality and G2 win the major, which is an expected outcome, I'm sure. But yeah, just to go over my side of what I expect to happen here. So I'm having Spirit versus Vitality as my final lineup. I think again it's a similar story. I think to what's going to happen in G2, but it's even more extreme to me. I think Spirit is even more incomplete as a team. They're more of a one-dimensional weapon than G2 is. They're going to rely on Donk and Shiro to bring them through that game, and I just think Vitality's a better part of some of their parts. I think Mezzi's a quality support player who's going to outdo what Magix is doing in role. I think Apex is outcalling Chopper in role. I think Spinks. If I'm comparing, I guess I'm comparing Spinks to Donk and Ziwu to Shiro. So I'd say they're actually reasonably comparable. I think Donk's more ahead of Spinks than Ziwu is of Shiro probably, but it's not by huge margins. Again, like those four players are in maybe a tier apart, but they're with the counterparts they're somewhat averaging out, I'd say. And then Zontix is a much inferior player to someone like Flames. So overall, the firepower should be on Vitality side a little bit, although maybe in the star two, Donkinchira is the strongest star two, probably. But I think ultimately, as much as this could be Spirits Major, Vitality is the best team overall. They play the best Counter Strike overall. They have the best map pool overall, and I just think it's time to prove it. So Vitality takes the major, and I get to come. Simple.
Um, one thing that I do think we need to talk about is the fact that this is going to be a best of three rather than a best of five,
Yeah, I think
which I do
Vitality would
think,
be even more favored in best of fives against
yes,
any of these
exactly.
opponents. Actually,
So I
yeah,
was going to say essentially the same thing, but in the opposite of, I do think Vitality would win that if it was the matchup that I think is going to happen. Obviously, we disagree in both the semifinals, so we have two different teams here.
yeah.
So by now, both of those teams that you're talking about, in my opinion, are out of the tournament. Um, hopefully.
Hopefully
Um,
not. um,
but the aspect of being a best of three rather than a best of five does give a slight percentage boost to Spirit because I
I'm
think
with
that
you.
it makes it more plausible that Donk and Shiro could just pop off. And if Zaiwu just has like a slightly slow start, maybe, maybe Spirit could get that across the line
Yeah,
in a Vitality Spirit Grand Final. But I do think that, like, if you repeat that and repeat that and repeat that, and statistics says that the more you repeat something, the more reliable it becomes, Vitality will be winning the majority of those games.
yeah.
There is a
They're just a
slight
superior
chance that,
team across the
yeah,
board on average.
yeah. Mhm. On their
Um,
slow days, on their good days, just depends which one we get, essentially. So, um, to draw another graph,
we love the graphs.
um, if we just put another scale here, goodness scale.
Back to the goodness scale, our favorite.
So we just have the goodness scale here. I'm gonna put vitality. Their peak CS is a 10 up here. Okay,
Sure.
this is their fucking pinnacle CS.
Yeah.
I could say that they have the potential of maybe dropping down to like a 6, maybe.
Yeah. I'd say that's fair.
Whereas I would say Spirit's top game, where Donk and Cheer are both going off, Magic's isn't a liability, Chopper's calling a good game. That maybe puts them up at like an 8.5, I'd say. Okay.
I'd even give it higher. I think Don
Yeah.
Kuchera are good weapons enough
9. Oh,
that it
yeah,
could.
9.
Yeah.
9 feels fair.
Yeah.
But they also have the potential of dropping down to a 4.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So we have these two brackets here essentially. And if Vitality is up in this 9 to 10 range,
It doesn't matter what happens, they
doesn't
win.
matter what happens. They
Yeah.
will put that across the line.
Yeah.
However, if Vitality drop down to like their 6 or 7 game and Spirit is playing their 9 game, that's the situations that we would be talking about there.
Yeah. Yeah.
However, this is also not a uniform scale here, you know?
Yeah.
If we actually to like put effort into this, I would say their shape, generally speaking, is a bit more like this, where
Right.
it's quite unlikely that they'll play their 10 game.
Yeah.
It's very likely this is the vitality right
Sure.
here.
Sure.
It's unlikely that they'll play their 10 game. Very likely that they'll play their like 9.5 game,
Sure.
but also equally unlikely that they'll play their 6 game.
Yeah. Yes. I'm with
Um,
you.
however, I would say that Spirit, their shape is a bit more tapered at the top rather than being like the width
Yeah.
isn't quite as thick at the top. Whereas I think they would probably go down to about here and then branch down and just be really quite thin
I think
sometimes.
I'm with you on that as well. Like I think it's just the floor of spirit is so low as well.
Mhm.
Like that's part of the issue. And then at the same time, like on average, I think they play like their average game is like a 7, you know? Like but I'd say
Yeah,
Vitality's average
exactly.
game is like an 8, you know? Like and I
Yeah,
think
so the
that
thickest
bears
point
out.
is yeah, maybe that'll go down like that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it
Yeah,
might
the
even be a
thickest point
high
is
8,
most
honestly.
likely.
Yeah, and I'm
Yeah,
with you.
the
I
thickest
think this is essentially the probability I'd suggest. I'd say there are outside factors here too. Like vitality is also like a choker in some of these games.
mhm.
I think there are times where they're the favored team, and you see that they get in their own head or they get outplayed, and then in
Or
these
Epic starts
close
trying to do too much.
right, and it's when it's these like very close breakdowns. Somehow it always feels like it can go against vitality, and especially the later in the tournament it goes. Early in the tournament, doesn't matter who they face, they're just gonna shit on them all the way through. And then later in the tournament, it almost doesn't matter who they face, they have a chance to lose that game. It feels like, that as you say, their bottom level is like a 6, and a lot of people can get a better than a 6 on you know a good day.
Especially in
So
a best of 3.
is exactly. So I think overall, that being said, Vitality are the best tournament left in this tournament. Best team left in the tournament for my money. They play the best CS overall. They've been the best consistently throughout the year. That doesn't necessarily count for much in a one tournament format, you know. But I still think overall they've got what it takes. They just need to do it. And if they don't, lots of changes probably come. Even if they do, maybe changes come regardless. But we'll be here to talk about that when it happens. So now it's time for the alternate universe final of
Yes.
Mongols versus G2. So
Yes.
give us what you
So,
got.
I think Mongols, I think they're going to make a deep run in this tournament. I think they're making it to the grand finals. I think that they've been put on the right side of the bracket to do it. However, also in these games, the Mongols versus Mao's game, I would imagine that Mongols is the crowd favorite in that matchup.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
They got the home advantage. They are Mongolian, they're not Chinese, so there's a slight aspect to that that might have to be considered. But the Mao's team isn't even Mongolian. So
yeah,
like
yeah. It's even
like
further away.
yeah,
And also
like
they don't have like legacy big name players either on
mhm,
Mouse. So like if they had a Rops or a Frozen or something, maybe there's some fans in China that are gonna rate these players. And I'm
Mhm.
sure there are fans in the crowd that are going to rate the players they got now on Mouse, but they're not storied big name players. It's not like when you bring out a Kenny S or a Simple or whoever, where people are going to be crazy already because these are inspirational players to many people. But, I think
And
Mouse don't have that quality.
especially to do with how this tournament has gone as well with the crowd cheating. It's not the best aspect to rely on, but it is an aspect that you have to consider.
It
Where
helps on LAN.
in it helps on LAN, it helps being the crowd favorite in these games because the team is more invested in you and they're more likely to make that loud rumbling noise when a flank is going on if they care about that flank coming through. If they're
Yes.
worried about it, they're going to be like, "Oh no,
Yeah.
no," and that will just get through to the players, and that will make them check their backs, and that could give you a slight edge if you need that slight edge. And I think that could play into part of why I believe that they would beat Mouse and Spirit.
Yeah. Just with Mouse specifically, I also think it plays into this fragile mentality problem that I see on Mouse as well. Like,
Definitely.
I'm not confident that they play well at being, cheered against with the crowd. I'm sure these are young players that want to be beloved, and that could also get in their head in this match as well.
And I could just see Techno 4K or Senzu just doing like a big play and just having Mao's in shambles, just like the uproar of the crowd, everyone cheering for their demise,
Yeah,
that could definitely cause them to falter. And then the same thing for the Spirit match, not to the same extent, but it could play a factor in it. However, when we get to the G2 Mongols game, G2 is the fan favorite.
yeah,
Like I I have like 40 Chinese students that I teach maths to. Any of them that know anything about CS, they love Nico. They love Monacy. They love G2 as a whole, but particularly the star players. They love like exactly what you said, that legacy player. Like FaZe and G2 are the two most favored teams in China.
yeah.
Like the fan
Just
base,
just
like
legendary
yeah.
players across the board,
Mhm.
really. For, like, not for G2, I guess now, but these Nico and Monacy are legendary names. Now and forever. These are going to be players that anywhere, anywhere that anyone knows about CS, they'll know who these players are. And yeah, it's definitely not surprising that they're going to have a crowd on their side in that sense.
And FaZe and G2 are also probably the number one teams for like content producing.
Sure,
Like I'm always getting those like phase videos where they do like tier lists in my recommended. G2 does the same thing. I don't quite see the same thing from the Spirits and the Mouses of the
certainly
world.
not. No, nowhere near.
Um, so that is another aspect which makes them more popular in that region because just there's more content to view. You actually see the personality, like you get to know, you feel like you know the player. You can kind of have like a parasocial relationship
Yeah.
where like with these
welcome
players.
to welcome to the modern world, eh? Just a
Yeah.
load of parasocial relationships.
But that edge that I am attributing to having Mongols be the favorites, which plays in part to I do think that they will just win this in their own right. They are a good enough team. This isn't like they're not cheating their way to the final, you
Yeah.
know. But every little edge counts in the major playoffs.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll give a little thought about that in a second as well.
but when it comes to the G2 game, G2 is the clear favorites for that. So that is gone and working against them in this matchup, first of all. And then we have the star players like Nico and Monacy, which rise to occasions. And Nico also has the potential to do it.
Yeah.
And I can definitely see a world where Malbs just gets in his own head. It's his first time in a major. He's
It seems like the player
like,
that's not really set up for that, though.
yeah,
Like from
no,
what we've seen so far, he seems pretty stable, actually.
there is a chance that Mongols do take this across the line, but once again, this will be the same thing as the heroic G2 game and how I view the heroic Vitality game, where if G2 shows up and plays to the fullest potential that they can, they are pulling this across the line.
Yeah.
There is If Mongols win this against G2 in the grand final, that is G2 losing rather than Mongols winning.
Yeah. I'm with you on that.
And they should just pull it across the line. It should be. I don't even think. I don't even. If it was a best of five, I would give it even more favor to G2 in this instance. Um, Mongols definitely could take a map off them. They could definitely make it close, and they could even win in my books. Like I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for G2 to lose this final
Yeah.
once they get there, especially considering all the pressures that like Nico is under because he's about to go essentially retire, in my opinion. Um,
Depends how much
And
money Falcons will spend if that's
and
really a
this is the
retirement.
tournament. This is the tournament that like Nico needs to win. Like the major itself, like he's come so close so many times. If you think of like the times that a team choked in the grand finals, the two options that you're going to think of are the FaZe Cloud9 and the G2 Na'Vi games. Like both of them is Nico just getting bitch slapped and just like humbled to shit. But I think he's been humbled enough now. I think this is his time to do it. I think it's overdue. He's earned it, and I will shed tears if he does. Joyous tears.
I love it. I love it. Just to pick up on one thing you said earlier, we were talking about crowd thing, the crowd element with Mongols particularly. I think like you're not wrong. I think this can be a big factor. I think actually though in both games that I think we're really relying on Mongols having a decent start. Doesn't have to be amazing, but they cannot come out with a super dry, super
Oh no.
flat start. It will first of all the hype thing for you kind of goes away, and it almost can come like the quietness can almost become a mental problem in itself. Like no one's making any noise because you're so far behind, but you're the beloved team in that sense. I think it can be its own kind of pressure, but beyond that as well, like I think particularly because both of these teams that they're facing up against on average are better. You know, they're top five teams in the world over the whole year. Mongols is only reaching into that right now at this moment. So I think coming out with a good start is going to be really important, particular
Yeah,
for
I believe
Mongols
that.
in both of these games. And I think you want to hold. They're going to want to hold a little bit of an early lead if they want to really have a good chance of coming through.
And that's another thing which plays into G2's favor.
Yeah,
G2 are fucking good on the pistols.
yeah.
Like
They almost
so
rely on it in
yeah,
tournament wins to just crush like 70% of
exactly.
pistols.
So in terms of like the teams that like Mouse and Spirit, I could see Mongols getting off to a hot start, whereas I think the percentage for Mongols to get ahead and like play from a lead diminishes quite a lot when it comes to G2 purely because of the star players, and all we need is Nico to hit 3 headshots and the rest of the team will finish off that round.
Yeah,
And therefore then G2's playing from ahead, they're playing with momentum, they're in their element, and that's exactly the G2 that I want to see on that day. And I think it works. And also I think in the previous matchup where G2 did end up losing in that best of one to Mongols, G2 looked slow, and by the end of that game, I think if that game Mongols were on 12 for a while, and G2 were scratching back, and it ended up being a 13-10, I believe. Um, yes, it was a 13-10 win for Mongols, and it looked like if that went into overtime, G2 was going to win it.
right.
And that was I think that is Mongols is one of their best maps, Inferno. They've picked it quite a lot going into these teams that they've played, and
Certainly a
I
very
think that
strong map for G2 as
yeah,
well,
I
by the
think the
way.
fact that G2 has already faced up against Mongols in this tournament as well is another factor towards G2 winning, especially considering the fact that they lost that matchup, where you know that they went back through and they've studied that game, they've figured out what went wrong, and I don't believe that they will do that again, because the G2 that we've seen since that point has just been on fire. In
Yeah.
these games, when they beat Big 13-5, like Big didn't even look like they had a chance. They were the rounds that they did win were just happenstance. There was no repeatability to it really. They just what G2 did that round didn't necessarily work the way that they planned it to work. Mongol Big ended up winning that round, but it wasn't even close. There wasn't even a moment in that game that you expected Big to be able to pull it back, and it just wasn't a thought in my mind. And then we move on to the 3D Max game where G2 get revenge for their loss in the RMR, handling 3D Max 13-8, I believe. Yeah, 13-8. And they just did it once again, and they've just. But then once we got to the phase matchup, that's where I really started getting excited for G2's playoff run because they handled phase,
Yeah.
absolutely handled them. And that actually made me worried for my pick'ems because I had G2 going 3-0, so like it didn't matter in terms of my pick'ems if G2 made it through. But I was more worried for FaZe going into that next matchup against Furia,
Yeah.
purely because of how shit G2 made them look.
Oh, I mean, yeah. That's the thing. G2 on their day makes everyone look shit, I feel like. It's a similar story for Vitality. And even Spirit to a lesser extent. It's on their day. These players are good enough to make everyone look trivial.
So I,
And
I
yeah.
think if Mongols do make it to the final and G2 play them in the final, I think that should be a decided G2 win.
So
Nico
look,
gets his
I'll
trophy.
close us off
We're all happy.
on this. I think whoever wins that Vitality G2 semi final, I think that player will rise above and show the world that they are the best. To me, it's almost the true final of the tournament. It's a shame we get it in the semis in a way because it would make as good a final as it would any semi. But I think if Monacy takes it over the line against Ziwu, if he's facing Donk or he's facing against Mongols. He's going to show he's the best player in the world. I also just believe in Monacy in an incredible way in big moments like this. He's one that lifts himself to the occasion so much when it comes to the big pressure and when the spotlight's on him and it's him proving something. He's all exceptionally good at proving it, and he will do it if he gets the chance. I'm less confident in Zaiwu to do that. I think he's less of that. He's got less of that fire within him. But even if he takes out Monacy in the semi, I think he's going to take out Donk in the final. Likewise for Monacy, and likewise if it's Mongols on the other side. I think there's no way through. I think the true final is that semi. I've seen it before. I've been wrong before. Maybe I'll be wrong again. But that's the way I see it. As much as it's because bias, as it is because of these players and the mentalities and the qualities that I believe that make them so exceptional. With that all being said, I think we've concluded our pick'ems, and I hope we delivered it with some entertainment, even if the outcome was somewhat predictable. Um, you know, but I'm sure we'll be back very soon to talk about some of the stuff that happens after this very exciting event. But in between now and then, some fantastic CS to watch and some defining storylines to finish up the season, which is fantastic. I love the addition of the majors at end of season as well. By the way, I think it, in terms of like
Perfect way to end the storyline.
the viewer experience is so much better, and the storylines and the meaning of the narrative is so much more, succinct with that.
Mm.
So, with that all being said, I'm sure we'll be back soon to talk about some of the biggest changes that are likely to come up after this major and talk through the results of what happens in the playoff and, whose reality was a little bit closer to the truth. Um, and yeah, well, with that being said, I hope you have a great journey back home. I hope everyone at home had fun listening to this, and we'll be back again soon.